First of all, yeah, go ahead and introduce yourself. I don't want to take that spotlight from you. Just give us a little bit of background of who you are and what you do personally.
Thanks, Josh, for that. That was actually really cool. I feel like I learned a few new things too. Um, and yeah, I think I already introduced myself earlier, but I can give it again
Yeah,
real quick.
yeah, one more time.
Okay, yeah. So just an application developer outside of Chicago. I hold a degree in computer science from the University of Illinois at Chicago. So big Chicago girl.
And you're
Uh,
a linguist too.
yes. Oh yeah. I had a minor in linguistics. So that was like a little bit of my creative side. I do enjoy writing. A lot of technical people don't like that side, but I'm really
Yeah,
into it. So yeah, just, that's a little bit about me.
that's cool. And then with your organization, what prompted you to start, an organization for Muslim women or targeting, the Muslim,
Yeah.
that group? Just like I said before, it's such a niche group and it hasn't really been focused on a lot. So
Yeah, so I think it all kind of goes back to like my first internship in early college. I think it was my sophomore year. I was interning in the northern suburbs of Chicago. So it was the
where in Chicago?
oh no, the northern suburbs,
Oh,
the Vernon Hills area. So
yeah.
that area is a little bit more white. And
Yeah.
during during my internship, I realized like I looked around and it was mostly like a lot of older white men. Um, And although like they did have all those things, like they had like an internship like program where you got to meet other people and they talked about how diversity was important to them. Like there's a lot of talk, but it didn't feel like a lot of like action. And
Mm,
even though I did have like the right background to be hired, sometimes it just felt like I was just that one token person of color, the token Muslim girl. Also, I look visibly Muslim because I wear the hijab. So yeah, that was my experience in my internship. I was like, why are there no, first of all, there weren't like many other women, and then there weren't many other people of color at all. And then like Muslim women, like I could not tell you if I knew any at that point in my life who were in tech. Um, so as I grew through my college career, I like had another internship. I noticed the same thing. And then I talked to one of my other Muslim friends who was also in tech about it, and she had a similar experience.
mm,
So we both were involved with like women in tech and women in data type of groups. But then we realized we're like, why don't we do something for our community? So it's not just a lack of representation, but like Islamophobia is real. Like
yeah.
the president of the United States also like past 4 years also like reinforced a lot of Islamophobic rhetoric. So if you think about it, it's kind of all around. So that was part of kind of what pushed my co-founder Safa and I to start Muslim Women in Technology.
Wow. And then, yeah, your co-founders, who are they? Like, are they just your other, affiliates? Are they just friends or friends that you saw and then you kind of like linked up and you guys were like, hey, let's create a community?
Yeah, so my co-founder just me and Safa, but our board has expanded since then. So Safa was also she went to University of Illinois Chicago with me, and she majored in information decision sciences. So she also had that tech background. So we would both just talk to each other about like the things we noticed, and we'd be really frustrated about it. So we just decided to do work together and do something about it.
Yeah. Wow. And then what are those things that you do? Because you do have like meetings and you have gatherings I've been seeing. So in those meetings and gatherings, like what do you guys touch up on or what are very important agendas that you guys like to talk about?
Yeah. So I will say, like, although it is Muslim women in technology, it's not just Muslim women that it's catered to, or like those aren't the only speakers we have. We do just focus on like any like marginalized groups. Like, I think intersectionality is really important. So as we progress, we hope to work on that a little more. More specifically about our events, they kind of range. Something we try to do at least once a month is like a tech talk. So it's focused on some area of tech. For example, we had a talk on like Agile or Scrum, which is our
Yeah.
methodologies in software engineering. We've had product management folks speak about their experiences. We've had startup founders. We've had we have an upcoming we just had a data science talk. So we had like 4 data scientists from all these different companies speak to their experience.
Wow.
Yeah. So
I saw
those
someone from Google came too. That's so cool.
Yeah, so what that kind of offers is more like it's less about like your it's multifaceted, those tech talks. They talk about the skills you need to get into those roles. They talk about what their jobs entail, like what your resume should be like. but then they also sprinkle in a little bit of, hey, I'm a woman of color, or I'm a woman, Muslim woman. This has been my experience in data, or my experience in product management, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So yeah, so Tech Talks is the first thing, and then we do a lot of networking events too, so the community can get to know each other. People outside of the community who want to meet Muslim women in tech, kind of a little bit of that. And we do have like a Slack and a website where people can post about careers. So if you want, if
That's
your company
cool. Yeah.
like you can just post there.
That's cool. How do other people kind of react to it? So like when you invite, so you invite just you invite anyone, right? Anyone can come to your meetings, or so how do you, like whenever you do hold these meetings, do you see a positive reaction, or is there a need or want for more information?
Yeah, I think so far we've been very blessed, and our community really has been enjoying our events, and it sounds like it's been really beneficial because, for example, if you have access to 4 data scientists from like Google, McDonald's, like
Yeah,
other
that's
companies,
crazy.
I'm pretty sure you'd want to, if you're interested in data, you'd definitely want to join, even
That's
if
a
you're not.
long conversation, honestly. That's wow. That's so cool. And then do you think the field of tech specifically caters to the Muslim religion or religious sentiment? Because like you said, you know, our president, first of all, we have to acknowledge that it was 4 years of hardcore, you know, anti. So I was just gonna ask you like specifically for you, do you think the field, tech field is doing a great job or is even doing the job of catering?
Yeah, so I think a lot of what Kadesha said today, actually, I don't know if I pronounced her name right, so feel free to correct me. Um, a lot of what she was saying kind of resonated with me. I don't think it's only a problem with tech, I'll be honest. I think there's like this idea of like culture fit in like
Mm,
across corporate America. And I think culture fit is often code for a reason to discriminate, or like a way to get away with discriminating. So I think Twitter actually has this idea, which is bring your whole self to work. And they have like a Twitter faith group. And I think that's a great way to kind of combat that culture fit. Instead of the people you're hiring needing to meet your culture fit, it should be, hey, we should change our culture to make our employees feel comfortable bringing their whole self to work. Like,
yeah,
for example, when you're Muslim in corporate, especially if it's like for example, you can be a black woman who's also Muslim, who's also whatever, like, and you have a lot that's going for you. That's tough. So just because you're Muslim doesn't mean you're only Middle Eastern or South Asian, right? It could be a
yeah,
lot of other difficulties you're experiencing too. So sometimes just like when people realize you're Muslim, it just kind of like this taboo just because you exist.
mm, huh,
You
yeah,
literally won't do anything, you won't say anything, you'll just exist, or you'll be visibly Muslim, and it'll just be like this awkward thing, even though like you're just at the end of the day, you're like you're just human, just like everyone else, you know. So that's a little frustrating sometimes. So I do think there's a lot of work in terms of like instead of a culture fit, making your employees feel like they can bring their whole self to work. Um, that's what I'd say about that. And I I think yeah, there's just a lot of otherization, making you feel like you're different. And something Kadesha was talking about was a lot of it goes back to like managers and how managers make you feel. So my kind of take is a lot of tech companies will do a good job in recruiting, right? They'll get those
mm,
candidates that
yeah,
fill their like quota of diversity. But then once you're there, do they support you? Do they make you feel comfortable? Do they make you feel like you can be yourself? Oftentimes that's not the case. Oftentimes your manager will be second guessing your ability, or it's always the microaggressions, right? You can have all these like laws against discrimination, but there's not going to be a law to make you feel a little less awkward because your manager made some like offhand remark, right?
mhm, well, yeah,
Yeah, so I think a lot of it goes back to, yeah, they can hire you, you can get the job, but our company's making you feel comfortable at work?
yeah, that is the question. And what are your organization's goals here? So like short-term goals for your organizations, what would they be first? Short-term goals.
So the short-term goals would be essentially just to equip the women in our community with knowledge in different areas of tech. For example, if they're interested in data, just giving them that like overview and idea of, because the world of tech is so broad. There's so many different fields you can go into,
Right,
right? So
right.
just kind of first of all, increasing that knowledge for like our community, just so people know these things exist.
Mm,
And then the next thing would be like seeing. I think like when you see someone who looks at you in a place of like privilege or power, or it's like someone doing something really cool. Like, for example, the Grace Hopper conference that I also attended that Keisha mentioned, seeing all those women in those leadership positions made a big difference for me, because I'm like, oh, hey, that could be me someday. So I think that visibility of people who look like you in those positions is very important. And that's another short-term goal. Just showing these like other women, like, hey, there's these boss women in these roles, and that could be you too. Or those could be your friends, or that could be your network.
Yeah. And what are a few long-term, well, expectations? I mean, I ask people some long-term, and they're always like, no, I don't, have the. So what would be some like expectations,
Yeah.
maybe?
So I guess something more short term is to equip our own community with these things. And I think long term for us would be kind of get companies to start caring a little more. Like, I think it's very frustrating when you have to tell a company, like, hey, you should hire people who aren't white because it'll help you monetarily. Like,
Yeah.
they have more of an incentive to do that than just like money, right? But that's just the world we live in, I guess. So I think a long term goal would be building more of these connections with these companies, so they can not only hire more candidates that like might be people of color or Muslim or whatever, but they actually work to retain them and make them feel comfortable at work.
Uh, yeah, exactly. And then also, since tech and, computer science in general, they are the future, no matter, how many times people are, oh, tech, is too much. But why do you believe that women, especially women of color, have such a, or are the future for, the tech companies or just the tech industry in general? Or do you feel that women are the future of the?
I think a big reason is I think you really need new and fresh ideas, and when you have the same people at the table, it's hard for innovation to kind of occur. So I think that's one thing. Like, women are so cool; they have such amazing ideas. You need to give them more of an opportunity to get what they want to get done, because they're amazing, they're intelligent, they're brilliant. More another idea that I have, or another like aspect to this would be like things like algorithmic accountability, right? A lot of times in data, when there's like biased data, it's because the people at the table or the developers, for example, have their own bias. And I kind of think at the end of the day, the only way around it is like the more people you have of different like backgrounds, of different thoughts, that's like the one way to kind of get around it. And if there's no women at the table and you're developing things in a world where half the people are women, like there's kind of something wrong there, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, that's my take on that.
Yeah. And then who inspires you personally? Or are there because like when I was doing research, I honestly didn't really find a lot of like Muslim tech startups or influenced tech startups. So I was just gonna ask you, are there other organizations or people that influence you that maybe we can also, put their name out there and we can even research that too?
Yeah, there's so I will start by saying there are a few or quite a few Muslim women startup CEOs. They just don't get too much attention.
Hmm.
So we've actually had an event featuring them. So I guess my plug would be check out my organization's like Instagram, follow us because we feature like these women in these positions. That's one. Um, another, I guess, another way would be I'm trying to think of what other organizations there are, and
Or people or individuals that you specific individuals or
yeah, actually, like there's a lot of like women who went through, or not a lot, but like a few women that I can think of that went through Y Combinator, which you might be familiar with, and they're like Muslim women. So I think honestly, it's just listening to their stories and like just reading up. I think there was a Forbes put out like 100 influential women in startups or something. It was like some list like that, and there were a couple Muslim women on there, which was pretty cool. So I checked that out. Um, I can post my org
yeah,
like
for sure. Yeah.
Instagram. You can check that out.
Yeah, for
That's
sure. Yeah. And then were there any events that, I mean, I think you answered this already, but I was just going to ask you specifically, like any events that you went to that really inspired you, like a specific event or that you saw a speaker and you were like, and how you felt and did it really inspire you to like go and, you know, build an organization after, or why did it inspire you, stuff like that?
Yeah, I do have an answer for this. So I want to say my sophomore year of college, I went to the Grace Hopper conference. So at this point, my classes were like 100 people big, only 3 girls in a class, and there was a lot of white men in my classes. But then I went to this conference for women in computing. It was like 8 a.m., like the first day, I walked into this Toyota Center in Houston. I walked in, and there were just thousands of women, all in tech. And I just kind of got goosebumps, honestly. I was like, whoa, there's so many women that exist in this space. And then the women started speaking on stage. There were people who were like astronauts that were women.
Well, yeah.
There were CEOs. There were like all these people. I forgot this one lady's name. I kind of want to look it up, but she basically invented like I forgot which country she was from, but she was talking about how she the country she lived in was having an issue with generators. So she got inspired from her. She saw the kids outside playing soccer. So
Mm.
she created a jump rope that power power the generators in her area, and it was just so cool because
Wow.
big problem in her community just by like seeing people play soccer and like thinking about kinetic energy or whatever it was. So seeing those women like do these groundbreaking things was like the turning point for me. Um, yeah, I highly recommend the Grace Hopper
Yeah,
conference.
that's dope. Man, that's so cool. And then what like, so like you said, you know, tech is such a general, you know, such a general field. Specifically, like what would you like to see be more tapped into, like in terms of tech, like the health industry, e-commerce, or any gaming, or what would be like something that you would be really excited if you were to learn, like, oh, this Muslim woman started this, you know, blah 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 company, or what would be a
Yeah,
category?
honestly, it's hard to say because even like video gaming, right?
Yeah.
There's no, just not women in there in general. If they are, they're treated very terribly. So I think my answer would just be across the board. If I saw like just more women across the board in these positions and women of color, I think that would be it for me. Especially women, not just like junior developers. Like I want these women to be the senior developers. I want them to be the people making the decision, calling the shots. Um, yeah, I think that's what I'd love to see.
Yes, dope. Well, that's all the questions I have for you right now. Thank you so much for, you know, taking your time and answering. And I always say this, Sahara laughs at me, but the last question is, how can we or everyone authentically support you? Because, you know, I run a podcast and I always say, you know, how can people authentically, because people always say, how can you support? And then they don't end up really, but how can we authentically support you and your organization?
Okay, so I'm gonna give you guys action items then. Um, so there's this idea of mentorship where you can mentor someone, but then there's this idea of sponsorship. So sponsorship is more when you're in a room and there's an opportunity, you think of your buddy and you're like, hey, she would be great for this. I should bring up her name. I should kind of help do that. So that's one thing. So try to be like a sponsor for like women of color, Muslim women, whatever you can do. And then another thing is allyship. So at work, I have this one friend. He's a Hispanic, and we kind of it's like we both got each other's back. So, for example, there was this one time where I worked on something and I didn't get any credit. So I walked into our stand up the next morning and I heard him talking, and he's like, "Hey, Sarah actually worked on this and she didn't get any credit, so I just wanted to highlight that."
Hmm.
Little things like that really go a long way, and just knowing that someone else has your back is very important. So intersectionality and having each other's back. Um, and lastly, specifically for Muslim women in technology, we have a group of tons of women in tech. A lot of them are looking for jobs. A lot of them have these great jobs. So I would say if you have a job in mind, reach out to our group, follow our social media, like our posts, support us, like just elevate these stories of these women of color, these Muslim women. And I think that visibility can really go a long way because if there's some young girl and she sees that you reshared this thing on your Instagram story and she's like, hey, that girl looks like me, maybe I can go into tech too. I think you'd be surprised the impact you can really have.
Oh, perfect. We'll probably also drop your Instagram handle too, so everyone can follow you and yeah, see what you're about. There we go. Yeah,
We have a
on it.
link page. We have like a Slack, Instagram. So whatever's your cup of tea.
Perfect. Exactly. So there's no excuse to not support SARAH. Yeah, thank you so much, SARAH.